We do now the recap of the breakout sessions. Basically, that will be 5 minutes each. They have a seat and just tell you what you basically missed if you didn't attend. So coming up on stage, Martin for designing incentives for decentralization. Then Tobias for traditional infrastructure meets blockchain infrastructure. And Jake and Sebastian for proof of stake privacy. Thank you.
Cool. Then, yeah, happy to go ahead. So we had a breakout session on validator privacy, and we talked about we kicked it off talking about a research project in which we identified all validators on the Gnosis beacon chain, which, for the ones who are not familiar, is very similar to the Ethereum mainnet beacon chain. And by linking the pub keys to their IPs, we're able to proof of concept an attack against validators, whereby you DDoS a validator for 5 seconds in order to prevent them from producing blocks and make the transactions roll over to you. Now, this has been known since over 2 years, actually. There's nothing new in that. What is new is that there's actually now, especially with the advent of significant MEV, significant economic incentives. And while so far discussion has been focused around introducing changes to the consensus algorithm, specifically single secret leader election, we're proposing to go in the direction of transport level privacy. And that's where Hopper comes in. Hopper is a mixnet that allows you to not just peer-to-peer send data, because when you send data from one peer to another, you inherently also expose your IP address. And that's what we used in our proof of concept there of de-anonymizing validators on the beacon chain. So yeah, we discussed with validators and node operators, and it turns out there are some ways of mitigating that, which are entirely unfeasible, unfortunately, for home stakers. So yeah, it's interesting to think about transport level privacy on the validator side to avoid attacks. It's not just attacks for profit. We also then discussed that indeed there is attacks which are just trolling, right? I know somebody's IP address, maybe Vitalik's, right? I find out where Vitalik runs his validator, and from then on I can just constantly hammer his node. That would be kind of an analogy of the Shanghai attacks that Ethereum has seen 2016. Back then it happened on-chain. I would expect that we do see something like this now happening on the transport layer. And to preempt that, I would like to initiate a discussion on transport level privacy, which any peer-to-peer system needs even more so than the Web 2.0 that we're all familiar with. We then discussed attacks. Somebody was asking, could you launch such an attack not just against the validators, but against the sync committee members? So if you attack sync committee members, that's feasible, albeit a bit more expensive. And by doing so, you would basically break these beautiful upcoming light clients. So light clients is an amazing thing because it makes data inherently trustworthy. But if you mess with the sync committee, you can basically break these light clients in the same way. So yeah, lots of interesting questions and Q&A on transport privacy on the consensus layer of Ethereum. And then we're talking about using Hopper as a mixnet to bring that missing link of transport layer privacy to Ethereum and potentially other chains that have similar issues.
Yes, oops. So I'm going to take over, I guess. A little short introduction first. So my name is Toby. I'm with T-Systems, which is a company that mainly builds digitalization services. Subsidiary of Deutsche Telekom, which is the largest European telco enterprise. And then maybe if you don't know those companies, often people confuse us with T-Mobile US, which we are also part of indirectly because we are a majority shareholder in T-Mobile US. So a little bit of background why we are here, because I think it's not as obvious. So I'm gonna tell a little bit the infrastructure story first. So at Deutsche Telekom, what we have been doing over the last 20 years, I guess, is providing infrastructure services for various things. For instance, for the mobile phone. So what we have been doing is we have been building out all those telco towers, basically connecting everybody with each other and enabling you guys to call each other over phone. Then after that, we dug up all the holes in the ground to try to provide internet services for all of our German customers, but also in Europe. It's still an ongoing process. And then at some point you need to ask yourself, what is the next thing that we can support? And since 2 years we are also actively supporting the blockchain space. We have been starting out on Chainlink, where we are providing Oracle services. So we provide price feed data to the Ethereum blockchain. And then afterwards we have been continuously building out our staking services. So we actually, like Chainlink is Oracle services, but we have been diving deeper into staking infrastructure, starting with the Flow network, which you might know from NBA Top Shots, and then continuously supporting multiple networks like Polkadot. But then right now we ended up on the Ethereum network, where we are also partnering with a liquid staking protocol. Actually, the guys from Stakewise are also here. I have seen them. But yeah, the breakout session, let's get to the breakout session now that the introduction is over. Since we are like a big telco infrastructure service, main goal was to get some kind of feedback from the people who are actually working in the blockchain space, since it's like a nice event to get some feedback who are heavily invested in the scene. And the first question that we wanted to try to figure out is what exactly is considered blockchain infrastructure. So on the one hand, you have the validator nodes, like providing infrastructure for maintaining the consensus for public blockchain networks, which is the thing that we are focusing on. But then, of course, there are also other infrastructure areas, for instance, custody, and then drawing on that, also enabling developers with easy tools to participate in the whole ecosystem. And then after that, coming with also digging a little bit deeper into the challenges that come with building a business around infrastructure for blockchain networks. Since there is a little bit of a conflict of interest when we have, for instance, like big players like Deutsche Telekom going into the space and trying to build a profitable business versus, and of course there's also always this point of delegation, since our business right now is maintained through the delegation that we receive and charging a small commission. There's an incentive on our end to receive as much delegation as possible, to be as profitable as possible. However, in the whole blockchain space, there's this notion of decentralization, and this is like a huge challenge, of course, always to keep in mind the decentralization aspect when trying to build out this business. And also with regards to cloud providers, we see things like AWS and other major like hyperscalers occupying more than 50% of consensus on some blockchain networks, or even close to that, and even the announcement of Hetzner stopping infrastructure support for Solana. So there are a lot of challenges with regards to the decentralization of the whole blockchain space, which we discussed in the session. Also, I mean, I don't want to occupy too much space, but also with regards, what might be interesting to share, we are not like Telecom is not used to like getting crypto rewards and also trying to build a business around this. So like the whole business case, communicating those things to management, maintaining the servers, but then also legal challenges that were all things that other companies also in discussion mentioned. And I think there's still huge potential in the space to grow and things that need to be worked out. And incentivization mechanisms need to be built out to also focus on keeping things decentralized. But yeah, heading over to my colleague.
Hi, well, thanks very much for setting my part of the talk because I'm from Rockaway Labs and we want to help blockchains decentralize. And we think that this problem has two parts. Number one, someone has to do the hard work to map out the infrastructure and actually take into compute where there are concentrations of stake, how validators are doing in processing blocks, etc., and somehow build up a scoring system that helps identify validators that are helping with decentralization. So we've built this website, it's called observatory.zone. We're developing it all the time, and we've gotten some interesting feedback from people at the workshop. But I also want to call out the staking summit as a whole. We've had very engaging conversations, and the feedback is super valuable. But to continue to the next part, once there's transparency in where the validators are, where their nodes are, and where they're located, we can design incentive systems around helping them move those nodes to more advantageous locations for the blockchain, right? So we've actually, the observatory itself supports what-if planning, so a validator can test, hey, what would happen to my score if I move from Hetzner to another node? And they will immediately see what sort of increase they'd get. And then if we say have a liquid staking system behind this that's using the observatory data to just allocate stake, then this system can immediately pick up this good move by the validator and start moving it more stake. And the idea is here to help decentralize. We don't just want to be the people who say, well, there's a concentration here, do something with it. We would like to be in a position to support those validators and give them more stake if they're doing these moves that actually benefit the system. So the main example that I was showing is, say, if a blockchain foundation says we want to use, I don't know, 2 million Kuji, 3 million Kuji to support decentralization, then we're able to automatically sort of stake those with validators and support those that are making those changes pretty much immediately and automatically. So we've gotten some interesting feedback on this. And there's a whole other part of, say, data economy around this that we didn't take into account before. So this was actually quite valuable for us. That would be it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Patrick. Sorry for being late. I'm from Lighthouse DAO. We have a project called the Orb. We built the Orb to be able to finance public goods, originally on IBC and specifically Evmos, and we're taking this as well to Solana. The way that the Orb works is it allows anyone to stake through our contract, and it distributes that stake across multiple validators. And part of the yield that's generated from these validators is then distributed to a treasury, and the users or entities that have staked on the Orb can then vote on how that treasury is used and to which projects that treasury is allocated to. What's kind of interesting about this is we're introducing a new fundraising and financing model that's more Web3 native. So traditionally, if you wanted to, say, finance a project as a foundation, as a fund, or even as a validator, you have to deplete your capital in order to do that. So you're going to take some of your capital, you're going to give it to some other entity, and hope that that investment pays off. When you do it using the Orb, the way that it works is that you can stream payments based on the yield that's generated from block rewards. So you can basically have a finer control over how that yield is being used, and the duration of funding that you give to a project. It also allows the financiers to not deplete their capital, so it's kind of a zero-risk strategy for financing projects. And what we did at our workshop today is we spoke with mostly validators around how they use their block rewards. So very basic things like investing in projects, restaking, some very basic concepts that I think we're all familiar with. Then we asked the question of, if you got really creative with this mechanism, what kinds of things could you fund? And some interesting ideas were generated around it. So anything from lobbying to funding educational programs to even making donations to charities. And what's kind of cool about this is that if you use the Orb to do these kinds of things, it adds these differentiating factors to ecosystems that decide to fund goods or services or investments in this novel way. more than just restaking. And the advantage that is created by this is that ecosystems can be built up in a much faster and a more efficient way because the ecosystem itself is voting on how these funds are distributed. So everyone that participated in the workshop got a lot of value out of it, it seemed, because we didn't have a lot of these ideas before going into the workshop. So by sharing these different ideas, we now have a way of moving forward with several validators and certain foundations, specifically Evmos and Solana, on how to finance public goods and even go beyond that to maybe financing real-world goods and services.
So I guess that's all for us, and we'll see the floor to the next.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank you.